So, there is a want and there is a need. Here we are, Mailbag. Remember, these are comments and questions that you guys leave on the channel. I'm airing them if I don't know the answer, or I'm trying to answer them if I do know the answer, or if it's a really pertinent comment. So, the first one comes from the Death Beats. And I think this is from Gary in the Death Beats, but I apologise if it's not from Gary. He writes, in response to is the SMR I did recently, but I'd only published a couple of days ago actually, regarding the art of DJing dying. And he writes, the art of DJing has certainly gone out of the window in many respects. I started clubbing in the mid-1990s, and since a number of my friends were big names in the jungle, drum and bass, that was the scene I gravitated to. By the time drum and bass music had grown up in the late 90s, the standard of DJing was the next level. In those days, DJs such as Fabio and Groove would stroll into the club carrying heavy flight cases full of dub plates before laying down a wicked selection. Same as me, I used to walk in with 4 boxes, as I've said on that video, of 12-inch vinyl. But I wasn't sort of in the whole sort of drum and bass. I was in a slightly different slot, really. I was sort of mainstream. Techniques with the standard turntables, and it took years of practice to be able to mix with them properly, and even longer to be able to do it in a club environment. Oh God, I so agree with that. I had 2 1210s at home, which I used to use to practice the breakbeats between various records, especially if they were new records in the box. You needed to understand how they worked, and it was even in more interesting is if you had white label machines. White labels typically were rushed into the market space. And hadn't been properly produced, and you quite often found with white labels that the BPMs varied, they wavered on the record, purely because they hadn't been done on a drum machine or they hadn't been properly processed and quantized. Therefore, they were always slightly out. They were a nightmare, some of those records. Moving on, not only did these guys have beat matching skills, they were able to blend the tunes seamlessly so that each track worked with the next tune coming in. Although there's still fractions of DJs out there who are using technologies to lay down proper mixes, there's definitely a culture of trashy DJs who have absolutely no ability to put together a cohesive mix despite having the technology at their hands. And I can think of a few of those. This is most prevalent in what I like to call EDM scene, which is essentially a global misunderstanding of drum and bass, dubstep, house and hip-hop. This scene tends to feature people who are DJing as an excuse to stand on stage in front of people. Interesting. And if you ever heard them try to mix, it's embarrassing. You would expect them to switch from slow. You can expect them to switch from slow house tune to a drum and bass tune with no warning, usually out of being out bar. And I completely agree with that, because you've got to. My experience from the years I did it was you can't move from one genre to another. You have to ease the crowd from that one genre to another, and you have to do it in a proper way, because you have to take them with you. If you don't take them with you, once you've lost the crowd, rebuilding a crowd is very, very difficult to do. Believe me, I've sat and watched DJs do it, and I've sort of sat and watched DJs die on stage because they did exactly that sort of thing. Even with beat matching, they're unable to deliver a decent blend between the two tunes that are roughly the same tempo. Well, all I can say is it's good to get somebody else's view on this subject, and I think generally, Gary, you're agreeing with what I've said. Well, thank you. Next one from Petrus Ramdala. I think I've got that right. I probably haven't. And I do apologise because I am the world's worst at pronouncing names. And he writes, and if you install 2 gig of DIMM extra, the OASYS will have 3 gig of memory. Kind regards. In response to a video I did on the OASYS back in 2018, July 2018, shortly after I bought this lovely machine that's sitting behind me. So, first of all, I would say thank you, because I did not know. I was always under the impression with the OASYS from the books, etc., that you had to upgrade the DIMMs. So you had to have 1 gig. It comes with 1 gig. You had to put another 1 gig in, or you put 2 gig, and then you had to put a second 2 gig in. You couldn't have an uneven DIMM selection, i.e. a 1 and a 2 in this side of this machine. So what I did the other week was when this came through, is I opened this up, well, I say the other week, a few days ago actually, I opened this up and I took the serial number of the board down, and then I went and had a hunt for the board itself. And the answer is yes, you can actually upgrade the DIMM in this in unequal segments. So you can have a 1 and a 2. And I didn't know that, so thank you very much for telling me that, expanding my knowledge on that. The one thing I do know about the OASYS is that when this thing was brand new and was launched at operating system 1.01, it would only address the first DIMM slot. Don't know why, but that's it. It would only address the first DIMM slot. So if you had memory in the second DIMM slot, it was irrelevant. So you had to make sure that if you're going to upgrade, you put a 2 gig memory in the first DIMM slot. And I suspect many of the early pioneers of the OASYS probably did that. I'm not sure which version of the operating system addressed this, whether it was 1.1, 1.2 or 1.3, but one of those versions addressed that issue, and now you can address both DIMM slots. So the machine itself does address both DIMM slots, which allows you to have this, as Petros writes, this 3 gig of memory. Personally, if I was going to do it, I'd probably put 4 gig of memory in it. I'd take out the original 1 gig chip and I'd put another gig in there to give you 4 gig. But this thing is a 32-bit operating system underneath the sort of Korg-isms that are put on top of it, and a 32-bit operating system will only address 4 gig theoretically, but in reality about 3.5 gig. And I have seen comments on the internet about it addressing only 3.25 gig, which I can't confirm and I can't deny because I don't know, but I know that a normal 32-bit operating system struggles to address the full 4 gig. It's quite happy with 3.5, and quite often these machines will configure themselves up with 3.5, not 4. So thank you for that. It was something I didn't know, so great. And the next one comes from Don DeVore, and he writes, I'm very happy with the System-8 as it is, not really worried about the updates at the moment. I use an SH101 plug out, so do I, funny enough, but I've got that on my System 1. And the Juno bank quite a lot, but of course the System-8 bank has the most flexible capabilities. I just wish it had 2 LFOs. My issue has been with the keys. The black keys are slightly rounded on top, so my fingers would slip off them and hit the adjacent key opposite. Oops, took a while. I think that's what he was going to say, because he sort of cut himself off after it took a. This was responsible to the System-8 rant I did over a year ago about no support. In fact, over a year, it was March 2018. No support for the System-8, and I still feel rather let down by Roland. They introduced a fantastic machine and really haven't, I don't think, have exploited what it is capable of doing. And now we've had all the sort of hoo-ha about the Zen Core engine in the Jupiter-X. It's good to get other people's views on the System-8, I have to be honest, because I think the System-8 is quite underrated. But I have to admit, I found exactly the same thing about you. I mean, I've got quite fat fingers, and I find with this one here, there's definitely an edge to the 88 key keyboard, but on the System-8, there's no edge. So your finger just naturally slips off. So I completely agree with that. But it does encourage you to be careful where you're placing your fingers. And the last one from Sean Cabanach. Totally agree. On the iPad app, finally got mine all set up when the updated iOS, and then there went the app. It was really just a replication of what you can do on the Jupiter screen, but I think most owners would agree there's no reason for Roland not to keep the app running. I kind of feel ripped off in that respect, even though it's a pretty small utility and in otherwise incredible instrument. Now, I feel even more ripped off than you in this respect, and I'll tell you why. This is in response to the MX1 Jupiter-80 and what's the next step in 2018, February 2018. And I'm really annoyed that Roland dropped the iPad application, because I felt it was really useful to use a slightly bigger screen than actually than the actual screen on the Jupiter, because you can actually move the angle of the screen. So for argument's sake, I would have the screen on something like this rather than looking at the Jupiter screen, which is sort of flat. I found that really, really useful for me, and I also found it useful with using the stylus pens to navigate around on here rather than here, and use this purely as a you could have two sets of parameters up on both. I think Roland, once they release an app like this, should actually support it, and I think the reason why they don't support it is because they paid somebody else to write it for them, and they refused to pay the author to carry on supporting it. In actual fact, moving an app from one platform of the Apple OS to another platform on the operating system of the Apple OS is a relatively simple thing to do. It's not a massively complex task, but somebody has to do it, has to recompile the code and has to test it. And that's the bit I feel they're not paying whoever wrote the app to do, and I think that really is shame on you, Roland, because you should support that up for at least 10 years after you've published something like that for the Jupiter, because the Jupiter is going to be around for 20 years at least. Okay, people are going to be carry on playing this machine for a number of years to come, and you've automatically started whipping out support. And the other thing I find really quite amusing about this, apart when I get over my anger, is the fact that when I bought the Jupiter, Roland gave me an iPad as part of the deal so that I could actually use the application to do the editing. So not only have they now taken the app away from me, and originally they gave me the iPad, which I don't use. I've actually given to a friend because I've got two bigger iPads to use to do the editing on. And I've actually got, sitting in the drawer down there, it's not down the studio, but it's actually here because it needed charging. I've actually got an older version of the iPad with the app still on it, which I refuse to update because I know I will lose the app functionality. So be it. Right, that's it for this one. Catch you on the flip side. Bye-bye. If you liked the content of the video you've just seen, please give it a thumbs up. It just helps the YouTube algorithm with its selection process. If you want to leave a comment, please feel free to do that as well. Down below somewhere should be the ability to do that. I do try to respond to all the comments that are raised on the channel. Sometimes it takes me a few weeks because of what I'm doing, and I'm getting more and more comments and questions raised on the channel, so it just takes sometimes a little bit of time to do a bit of research. If you want to be notified when I put more rants, mailbags and videos about this sort of legacy tech and even modern tech on the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit that bell icon, and you'll be notified by YouTube when stuff happens. I try to publish at least 2 times a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. Until next time, bye-bye.